Good evening, Instagram. How are you? Welcome to Bedtime Stories. How are you? Give us a wave and say hi. How have we got there? Andy and Karen, hi. Danny, hi. How you doing? Oh, I need to start live on Facebook as well. Chloe, hiya. Emma Louise, Brogan. Oh, hi, hello. How are you? Mwah. Hi, Facebook as well. How you doing? Give us a wave and let me know that you can hear me and see me, okay? Who have we got on here tonight? My goodness, hasn't the weather been amazing? You do have to apologise. Well, I have to apologise. I've got really, really shiny head. I think I burnt my head a little bit today. Have you been out in the sun today? Have you? It's been a beautiful day. Hi, Facebook. How you doing? Give us a wave and let me know if you can see me and hear me, okay? That would be lovely. Give us a wave. Who's there? Give us a thumbs up. So this is the time of night where we do bedtime stories. Most of you, I think, have been joining me most of the way along. All the hot faces there. You've been outside in the sunshine today. It's been glorious. Give us a wave on Facebook. Make sure that I can see. Oh, there we go. There we go. Lovely. Hi, Lisa. Perfect. Okay, I can see we are all getting busy now. Good. It has been so nice today. I hope you have all had a lovely day. Those of you who've been able to go outside and enjoy the sunshine, it's been amazing. I was just saying I've had a bit too much sun, so I've got really shiny forehead, so sorry about that. We're going to carry on today with The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. It's getting good now. As I was saying last time, do remember to send me your photos in of you guys, because you can see me but I can't see you. I want to see who is in my bedtime stories gang. We're on chapter 11 already out of 17, I think. So we've got a few more. Oh, have you sent me a message with your photo, Gareth? Yes, please. Brilliant. Yeah, good. We're on chapter 11. Are we ready, everybody? Come on then, let's do it. Chapter 11, Aslan is nearer. Edmund, meanwhile, had been having a most disappointing time. When the dwarf had gone to get the sledge ready, he had expected that the witch would start being nice to him, as she had on their last meeting, but she said nothing at all. And when at last Edmund plucked up the courage to say, "Please, your majesty, could I have some Turkish delight? You said," she answered, "Silence, fool." Then she appeared to change her mind and said to herself, "Well, and yet it would not do to have the brat fainting on the way," and once more clapped her hands. Another dwarf appeared. "Bring the human creature food and drink," she said. The dwarf went away and presently returned, bringing an iron bowl with some water in it and an iron plate with a hunk of dry bread on it. He grinned in a repulsive manner as he set them down on the floor beside Edmund and said, "Turkish delight for the prince." "Take it away," said Edmund sulkily. "I don't want dry bread." But the witch suddenly turned on him with such a terrible expression on her face that he apologised and began to nibble at the bread that was so stale he could hardly get it down. "You may be glad enough of it before you taste bread again," the witch said. While he was still chewing away, the first dwarf came back and announced that the sledge was ready. The White Witch rose and went out, ordering Edmund to go with her. The snow was again falling as they came into the courtyard, but she took no notice of that and made Edmund sit beside her on the sledge. But before they drove off, she called Morgrim, and he came bounding like an enormous dog to the side of the sledge. "Take with you the swiftest of your wolves and go at once to the house of the beavers," said the witch, "and kill whatever you find there. If they are already gone, then make all speed to the stone table, but do not be seen. Wait for me there in hiding. I, meanwhile, must go many miles to the west before I find a place where I can drive across the river. You may overtake the humans before they reach the stone table, and you will know what to do if you find them." "I hear and obey, O Queen," growled the wolf, and immediately he shot away into the snow and darkness as quickly as a horse can gallop. In a few minutes, he had called another wolf and was down with him on the dam, sniffing at the beaver's house. But of course, they found it empty. It would have been a dreadful thing for the beavers and the children if the night had remained fine, for the wolves would have been able to follow their trail and 10 to 1 would have overtaken them before they got to the cave. But now that the snow had begun again, the scent was cold and even the footprints were covered up. Meanwhile, the dwarf whipped up the reindeer and the witch, and Edmund drew from underneath the archway and on and away into the darkness and the cold. This was a terrible journey for Edmund, who had no coat. Before, they had been going 1/4 of an hour. All the front of him was covered in snow. He soon stopped trying to shake it off because as quickly as he did that, a new lot gathered, and he was so tired. Soon he was wet to the skin, and oh, how miserable he was. It didn't look like now as if the witch intended to make him a king. All the things he had said to make himself believe that she was good and kind and that her side was really the right side sounded silly to him now. He would have given anything to meet the others at this moment, even Peter. The only way to comfort himself now was to try to believe that the whole thing was a dream and that he might wake up any moment. And as they went on, hour after hour, it did come to seem like a dream. This lasted longer than I could describe, even if I wrote pages and pages about it, but I will skip on to the time when the snow had stopped and the morning had come and they were racing along in the daylight, and still they went on and on, with no sound but the everlasting swish of the snow and the creaking of the reindeer's harness. And then at last the witch said, "What have we here? Stop!" And they did. How Edmund hoped that she was going to say something about breakfast. But she had stopped for quite a different reason. A little way off, at the foot of the tree, sat a merry party, a squirrel and his wife and their children, and 2 satyrs and a dwarf and an old dog fox, all on stools around the table. Edmund couldn't quite see what they were eating, but it smelled lovely, and there seemed to be decorations of holly, and he wasn't at all sure that he didn't see something like a plum pudding. At the moment when the sledge stopped, the fox, who was obviously the oldest person present, had just risen to his feet, holding a glass in its right paw, as if it was going to say something. But when the whole party saw the sledge stopping and who was in it, all the gaiety went out of their faces. The father squirrel stopped eating with his fork halfway into his mouth, and one of the satyrs stopped with his fork actually in his mouth, and the baby squirrel squeaked with terror. "What is the meaning of this?" asked the Queen Witch. Nobody answered. "Speak, vermin," she said again, "or do you want my dwarf to find you a tongue with his whip? What is the meaning of all this gluttony, this waste, this self-indulgence? Where did you get all these things?" "Please, your Majesty," said the fox, "we were given them, and if I might make so bold as to drink to your Majesty's very good health." "Who gave them to you?" said the witch. "Father Christmas," stammered the fox. "What?" roared the witch, springing from the sledge and taking a few strides nearer to the terrified animals. "He has not been here. He cannot have been here. How dare you? Say no. Say you have been lying, and you shall even now be forgiven." Well, at this moment, one of the small squirrels lost its head completely. "He has, he has, he has," it squeaked, beating its little spoon on the table. Edmund saw the white witch bite her lip so that a drop of blood appeared on her white cheek. Then she raised her wand. "Oh, don't, please," shouted Edmund. But even while he was shouting, he had waved her wand. And instantly, where the merry party had been, there were only statues of creatures. One with its stone fork fixed forever halfway to its stone mouth, seated around a stone table on which there were stone plates and a stone plum pudding. "As for you," said the witch, giving Edmund a stunning blow on the face as she remounted the sledge, "let that teach you to ask favour for spies and traitors. Drive on!" And Edmund, for the first time in this story, felt sorry for someone besides himself. It seemed so pitiful to think of those little stone figures sitting there all the silent days and all the silent nights, year after year, till the moss grew on them, and at last even their faces crumbled away. Now they were steadily racing on again, and Edmund saw that the snow, which splashed against them as they rushed through it, was much wetter than it had been last night, and at the same time he noticed that he was feeling much less cold. It was becoming foggy, and every minute it grew foggier and warmer, and the sledge was not nearly running as well as it had been running up till now. At first he thought this was because the reindeer were tired, but he soon saw that that couldn't be the real reason. The sledge jerked and skidded and kept on jolting as if it had struck against stones, and however the dwarf whipped the poor reindeer, the sledge went slower and slower. There also seemed to be a curious noise all around them, but the noise of their driving and jolting and the dwarfs shouting at the reindeer prevented Edmund from hearing what it was, until suddenly the sledge stuck so fast that it wouldn't go on at all. When that happened, there was a moment's silence. And in that silence, Edmund could at last listen to the noise properly. A strange, sweet, rustling, chattering noise, and yet not so strange, for he'd heard it before. If only he could remember where. Then all at once he remembered. It was the sound and the noise of running water. All round them, out of sight, there were streams, chattering, murmuring, bubbling and splashing, and even in the distance roaring, and his heart gave a great leap, though he hardly knew why, when he realised that the frost was over. And much nearer there was a drip, drip, drip from the branches of all the trees, and then as he looked at one tree he saw a great load of snow slide off it, and for the first time since he had entered Narnia he saw the dark green of a fir tree. But he hadn't time to listen or watch any longer, for the witch said, "Don't sit staring, fool! Get out and help!" And of course Edmund had to obey. He stepped onto the snow, but it was already only slush by now, and he began helping the dwarf to get the sledge out of the muddy hole it had got into. They got it out in the end, and by being very cruel to the reindeer, the dwarf managed to get it on the move again, and they drove a little further, and now the snow was really melting in earnest, and patches of green grass were beginning to appear in every direction. Unless you have looked at a world of snow as long as Edmund had, you will hardly be able to imagine what sort of relief those green patches were after endless white. And then the sledge stopped again. "It's no good, your majesty," said the dwarf. "We can't sledge in this thaw." "Then we must walk," said the witch. "We shall never overtake them walking," growled the dwarf. "Not with the start they've had." "Are you my counsellor or are you my slave?" said the witch. "Do as you're told. Tie the hands of the human creature behind it, and keep hold of the end of the rope, and take your whip. And cut the harness of the reindeer, and they'll find their way home." Well, the dwarf obeyed, and in a few minutes Edmund found himself being forced to walk as fast as he can, with his hands tied behind him. He kept on slipping in the slush and mud and wet grass, and every time he slipped, the dwarf gave him a curse and sometimes a flick with the whip. The witch walked behind the dwarf and kept on saying, "Faster, faster!" Every moment the patches of green grew bigger and the patches of snow grew smaller. Every moment more and more of the trees shook off their robes of snow, and soon, wherever you looked, instead of white shapes, you saw the dark green of firs, or the black prickly branches of bare oaks and beeches and elms. Then the mist turned from white to gold, and presently it cleared away altogether. Shafts of delicious sunlight struck down onto the forest floor, and overhead you could see blue sky between the treetops. Soon there were more wonderful things happening. Coming suddenly around a corner into a glade of silver birch trees, Edmund saw the ground covered in all directions with little yellow flowers. The noise of water grew louder. Presently they actually crossed a stream. Beyond it they found snowdrops growing. "Mind your own business," said the dwarf when he saw that Edmund had turned his head to look at them. And then he gave the rope a vicious jerk. But of course this didn't prevent Edmund from seeing. Only 5 minutes later he noticed a dozen crocuses growing round the foot of an old tree, gold and purple and white. And then came a sound even more delicious than the sound of water. Close beside the path they were following, a bird suddenly chirped from the branch of a tree. It was answered by a chuckle of another little bird a little further off, and then, as if it had been a signal, there was chattering and chirruping in every direction, and then a moment of full song, and within 5 minutes the whole wood was ringing with birds' music. And everywhere Edmund's eyes turned, he saw birds lighting on branches, or sailing overhead, or chasing one another, or having their little quarrels, or tidying up their feathers with their beaks. "Faster, faster," said the witch. There was no trace of the fog now. The sky became bluer and bluer, and now there were white clouds hurrying across it from time to time. In the wide glades there were primroses. A light breeze sprang up, which scattered drops of moisture from the swaying branches and carried cool, delicious scents against the faces of the travellers. The trees began to come fully alive. The larches and birches were covered in green, the laburnums in gold, and soon the beech trees had put forth their delicate, transparent leaves. As the travellers walked under them, the light also became green. A bee buzzed across their path. "This is no thaw," said the dwarf, suddenly stopping. "This is spring. What are we to do? Your winter has been destroyed, I tell you. This is Aslan's doing." "If either of you mention that name again," said the witch, "he shall be instantly killed." While the dwarf and the white witch were saying this, miles away, the beavers and the children were walking on after hour into what seemed like a delicious dream. Long ago they had left their coats behind them, and by now they had even stopped saying to one another, "Look, there's a kingfisher," or "I say, bluebells," or "Wasn't that a lovely smell?" or "Just listen to the thrush." They walked on in silence, drinking it all in, passing through patches of warm sunlight, into cool green thickets, and out again into wide mossy glades where the tall elms raised the leafy roof far overhead, and then into dense masses of flowering currant and among hawthorn bushes where the sweet smell was almost overpowering. They had been just as surprised as Edmund when they saw the winter vanishing and the whole wood passing in a few hours or so from January to May. They hadn't even known for certain, as the witch did, that this is what would happen when Aslan came to Narnia. But they all knew that it was her spells which had produced the endless winter, and therefore they all knew when this magic spring began that something had gone wrong, and badly wrong, with the witch's schemes. And after the thaw had been going for some time, they all realised that the witch would no longer be able to use her sledge. After that, they didn't hurry so much, and they allowed themselves more rests and longer ones, and they were pretty tired by now, of course, but not what I'd call bitterly tired, only slow, and feeling very dreamy and quiet inside, as one does when one is coming to the end of a long day in the open. Susan had a slight blister on one heel. They had left the course of the big river some time ago, for one had to turn a little to the right, that meant a little to the south, to reach the place of the stone table. Even if this had not been their way, they couldn't have kept to the river valley once the thaw began. For all that melting snow, the river was soon in a flood, a wonderful, roaring, thundering yellow flood, and their path would have been underwater. And now the sun got low, and the light got redder, and the shadows got longer, and the flowers began to think about closing. "Not long now," said Mr. Beaver. And began leading them uphill across some very deep springy moss. It felt really nice underneath their feet, in a place where only tall trees grow very wide apart. The climb, coming at the end of the long day, made them all pant and blow, and just as Lucy was wondering whether she could really get to the top without another long rest, suddenly they were at the top. And this is what they saw. They were on an open green space from which you could look down to the forest spreading as far as the eye could see in every direction except right ahead. And there, far to the east, was something twinkling and moving. "By gum," whispered Peter to Susan, "the sea!" In the middle of this open hilltop was the stone table. It was a great grim slab of grey stone supported on 4 upright stones. It looked very old, and it was cut all over with strange lines and figures that might be the letters of an unknown language. They gave you a curious feeling when you looked at them. The next thing they saw was a pavilion pitched on one side of the open place. A wonderful pavilion it was, and especially now when the light of the setting sun fell upon it, with the sides of what looked like yellow silk and cords of crimson and tent pegs of ivory, and high above it on a pole, a banner which bore a red rampant lion fluttering in the breeze which was blowing in their faces from the far-off sea. While they were looking at this, they heard a sound of music on their right, and turning in that direction, they saw what they had come to see. Aslan stood in the centre of a crowd of creatures who had grouped themselves round him in the shape of a half moon. There were tree women and there were well women, dryads and naiads as they used to be called in our world, who had stringed instruments. It was they who had made the music. And there were 4 great centaurs. The horse part of them was like huge English farm horses, and the man part was like stern but beautiful giants. There was also a unicorn and a bull with the head of a man, and a pelican and an eagle and a great dog. And next to Aslan stood 2 leopards, of whom one carried his crown and the other his standard. But as for Aslan himself, the beavers and the children didn't know what to do or what to say when they saw him. And I'm going to leave it just there today. It's getting very exciting. Oh, right then. We will be back with you on, what day is it today, please, everybody? It's Thursday, isn't it? I'm going to be back on Saturday for the next instalment. So it will be 7 o'clock on Saturday when I see you next. There are people who've been saying on Facebook that they can't hear me. I've tried turning up all my sound pieces, so do let me know next time. I'll put a message in if you can't hear me properly, and I will get back to you. Thank you so much for joining me. It's getting good now, isn't it? So hi to Robert, hi to Vanessa, hi to Donna, Heidi, Trudy. Thank you all for joining me. And Natasha, I saw your name earlier. It's been so lovely to share tonight with you, and I'll see you. Thank you, Jodie, that it's Thursday, yes. I shall see you on Saturday. But to everybody on Instagram, if you flip over onto my Instagram page now, which is Faye Tozer Smith, I'll be doing a little Q&A with you all and picking a few people to speak to. So Faye Tozer Smith over on Instagram. See you on there live. Everybody else, I shall see you on Saturday. Mwah. See you later, Facebook. And see you in a sec, Instagram people.